Alright, so for right now we're doing a time-lapse on the Nikon Z6II, and the strange thing is when you start the time-lapse there's nothing on the LCD as well as on the EVF. It's totally blank. The only indication is that there is a slight sound and you can see that arrow on the LCD screen moving. There's like a clicking sound. Just gonna do a time-lapse for about 5 minutes or so and see how it is. What's up guys, Charles from TreeTanksDev. Welcome to a new video, and here we are in a really scenic location. We are going to attempt to do a landscape test between three cameras. First of all, the newest of them all, the Nikon Z6II, and is using a prime lens, the 24mm f1.8 Nikkor Z lens. Second of all, also a full-frame camera, the Canon EOS RP entry-level full-frame camera, which is the cheapest in the market, but the lens it's using is really good. It is the RF 24 to 105mm f4 lens, pretty expensive lens. And last of all will be a micro four thirds camera. This is Panasonic's flagship camera for photography back in 2018. This is the Panasonic G9, and it will be using a landscape lens. It is the Lumix 7 to 14mm f4 lens. So I'll also be showing you how to do some editing of the photographs in Adobe Photoshop. So let's go. Okay, so on all three cameras we'll be using the same settings. First of all, we'll be starting to shoot at f8 because between f8 and f12 is the best aperture to use for shooting landscapes. I'm in aperture priority mode, so I'll be doing the same thing for all three cameras, starting off with f8 and also in landscape colors. As you can see, landscape colors, shooting in RAW. And then we're going to take one photograph in f8 and the other photograph will be in f11. And then what I'll do next is I will switch over to flat picture profile, which is on the Nikon Z6II. For the Canon EOS RP, we'll be using the neutral color profile, and the Panasonic G9 will be using the natural color profile. So total will be 4 photographs. 2 will be in flat or neutral color profile, and 2 photographs will be in landscape or scenery color profile. That's about it. Okay, so first up we got the Nikon Z6II over here. You can check it out. Alright, so let's take a look at the first image, f8. Really nice color straight out of the camera. This is the raw image, a little bit dark in the shadows on the trees, but you can see using a prime lens, the 24mm f1.8, really nice sharp images. And next up I'm going to do in auto tuning. So firstly, you're going to hit the auto button, change the profile to Adobe Landscape. I'm going to plus 100 on the shadows and minus 100 on the highlights. Next up, I'm going to click the 3 dots and I'm going to click enhance details. This should automatically clean up some of that blurring in the trees because the trees were moving in the wind. Next, I'm going to save the image as a JPEG. So you can see really nice colors, everything, the highlights, the shadows look a lot better. And now I'm going to open up that JPEG in Adobe Photoshop again, and now we're going to do some color grading, which is optional. Click on adjustments, color lookup, and then you can play around with any LUTs that you have. You can download LUTs for free on the internet, or you can be like me and go to motionvfx.com. I bought this LUTs for my Final Cut Pro, but these LUTs that I bought are also able to be used in Adobe Photoshop, so that's pretty cool. So I'm going to select this LUT, which is called Apocalypse, this very moment, because this looks pretty cool. Okay, so now I'm going to select the background, and then I'm going to go into image and then go to adjustments and select shadows/highlights, and Photoshop should automatically adjust the shadows and the highlights. You can of course manually adjust the shadows and highlights, but I think they did a pretty spot on job automatically in this image. You can see the buildings in the background, really nice and sharp at the edges. A lot of detail in the whole image, the leaves, the bridge. Everything looks really nice and sharp, and this color grade looks, to me, looks pretty nice. You can see a lot of detail in the bridge, the shadows, and even in the trees high up with the wind blowing. Look how great those details are. So now I'm going to save the image and then show you the final product, and then we're going to move on to F11 to see if there's any difference. I highly doubt there'll be any difference, but we're just going to do a test anyway. I really don't think it can get any sharper than what was already done at F8. Okay, F11 instead. They don't have F12 for some reason. Alright, so this is F11 landscape color profile. You can see the image is so much darker. The blues look really nice, but the trees, the greens all look to have too much shadow. The image looks really nice, and here's the auto adjusted image. You can see all the details brought back. You can see the trees and the highlights really nice and sharp. Everything is brought back. You can practically see those words over there on that red bin. That's a life vest kind of container, and you can see the trees and the building and the bridge, the amount of detail and the sharpness in the trees and everything. F11 to me maybe a little bit sharper, I guess, than the F8, and here is a color grade that I used. You can laugh all you want, just testing out different color grades. Okay, so right now we go into flat color profile on the Nikon Z6II at F8, and I'm just going to show you the images, the end product images. So I'll just stop narrating now and let you look at the images.
Suck me in smoke, breathe me in and let me go. Filling the lungs inside you, and the blackened eyes make my way into your mind. Just to know what you knew, restless every time.
Alright, so next up we have the Panasonic G9, also shooting in F8, scenery picture profile. We're going to take two shots. First shot will be F8, second shot we'll just follow the Nikon at F11. And then of course we're going to switch to neutral picture profile as well, just to test it out. Okay, so Panasonic G9 scenery color profile F8. You can see straight out of the camera, it looks a lot brighter than the Nikon Z6II, but the image is still pretty clear. This is using a landscape lens 7-14mm f4. So once we make the color adjustments, you can see a lot of the highlights is brought out, and the sharpness is there in the trees and in the building in the background as well. You can see the image looks really nice and sharp. A lot of details, a lot of shadows as well, a lot of contrast basically between the shadows and the highlights. And you can see the trees all look pretty alright. They don't look as sharp as the Nikon Z6II, but overall pretty decent job. So now I'm going to reduce the shadows and increase the highlights, and then I'm going to click on enhance details to clean up any of that slight blurriness in the trees and stuff. So the colors, once you do the automatic adjustments, look a lot better, especially in the blues. So now again, I'm going to do my own color grading, just testing out different color grades. Again, these color grades I actually bought on motionvfx.com. There are different LUT packs available, so you can actually just check out and browse around and see what you like. You can actually buy it on motionvfx.com. So yeah, again, adjust the shadows and the highlights. This time automatically doesn't look so good, so I'm gonna manually adjust the sliders until it looks really good. It did take a lot more work than on the Nikon Z6II, but in the end, I think overall looks a pretty good image. The image for the G9 is a little bit harder to color grade than on the Nikon Z6II. F11. Natural. Now switch it back to F8 as well. that was in the F11. Alright guys, so last camera of all, Canon EOS RP with the 24-105 f4, really expensive lens. Okay, Canon EOS RP, gonna switch it to Zone AF. And also landscape colors. At f8. Okay, so last camera, Canon RP at f8. You can see that the photograph is severely underexposed, but once we do some automatic tuning, this image actually looks the best among all three once you do the auto fine-tuning and the colors and stuff. However, the image is not as sharp as the G9 and the Nikon Z6II. You can see a little bit of grain when you zoom in. The edges of the photo still look sharp, but if you zoom in, you can obviously see some grain, unlike the G9 and the Z6II where they didn't have any grain when you zoomed in on a well exposed area. And also, if you look at the trees, you can see some chromatic aberration in the trees, so it's a bit strange. Straight out of the camera it looks the worst, but once you do the auto tuning it looks the best. It's sharp throughout the whole image, but not as sharp as the other two, and you can see a little bit of grain. And in terms of color grading, this LUT actually does a really good job covering the chromatic aberrations in the trees and makes the image look a lot sharper, and also removes the grain. You can't see the grain anymore. And just to let you know that color grading the images on the Canon camera is actually easier than color grading the G9 and the Z6II photographs, which is really strange. You can play around more with the shadows and the highlights, so it's a lot easier to control and color grade. But straight out of the camera it looks really bad, really underexposed. Now we're going to f11. Switching to neutral, going back to f11, f8, sorry. And f11.
Sink to your heart to find you. Open up your eyes till you're blinded by the lies, so you can see what you do. Restless every...
Alright, so in conclusion, straight out of the camera guys, to me the Panasonic G9 looks the best. It was the best exposed picture among the three. I do prefer the sky blue on the Nikon Z6II. However, in terms of overall picture, I would prefer the G9. Once you do the auto fine-tuning of the colors and the highlights and the shadows, the G9 and the Z6II look pretty similar. I do prefer the colors on the Canon RP, looks the most natural. And once you come to color grading, the easiest among the three to color grade would be the Canon RP, as it's really easy to control the shadows and the highlights. The hardest to color grade was the G9. The Nikon Z6II was the only one using a prime lens, so naturally the image was the sharpest and had the most amount of details. The Nikon also had the best highlights to control. However, the Canon RP's shadows was the easiest to control among the three. The highlights were also really good, but not as good as the Z6. I think overall it's really hard to determine the winner, but if you look at the average of all the aspects that we look into the landscape photography, I think that the Nikon Z6II would be the winner, as all three cameras had its pros and cons, but the best average would be the Nikon to me. So thanks guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hit the subscribe button, the like button, and the notifications button. Leave your comments and tell me what you guys think, and I'll see you in the next one guys. Peace.